Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to use PyInstaller to freeze your Python packages. So freezing your Python packages means that you can give them to somebody as an installer file just as like any other program, and they can install it without being able to without needing to access or run any actual code. So they don't have to have Python installed in their system, no virtual environments, no Anacondas, Jupyter Notebooks, whatever. So for me, this is great if I want to share some kind of program I wrote with my colleagues, but I don't want to have them go through all the hassle of actually running Python code. So here I have a sample program that I've made. It's just app.py. We could see it in the folder over here on the right. And it does two things. So if I run it from the command line, from the terminal, I could say python app.py. And it says hello world. Oops. And it pops up this image of a crab. Actually, if you make it really small, you could see maybe that it is a crab. And then I can close it and it's all done. So what I really want to do is I want to package this so people can run it without having to see my IDE. So for that, I'm going to use PyInstaller. I'm going to do pip install PyInstaller. So you have to have pip installed for this, which I'm hoping you do if you're running Python code. It's installing here. And the way PyInstaller works is it packages all of the files that you have based on your sort of source base file that you would run normally. So here I just have app.py, but usually in a program, I'm sure you can have, tens, hundreds, even thousands of code files. And it analyzes all of them and figures out all the different libraries that you need. And it packages them all up into DLLs and just packages it all up either as a bunch of files into a folder or just into one big fat executable. Okay. So if I want to do this, the easiest way possible is I can say PyInstaller, and then I would hit app.py. Before I'm going to do that, I'm just going to quickly comment out a couple of lines of code, and you'll see why that happens later. So right now, the only thing that this program does is prints hello world. So I'm going to hit PyInstaller, app.py, enter. It goes through all this information, tells me what it's doing. With bigger programs, sometimes it'll throw errors at you, like it can't find some files. So here I have some traceback errors, attribute errors, blah, blah. For the most part, you can ignore that unless your program in the end is actually not working. And now it's building, building, building. And on the right, you can see over here, it created two folders as it's working. So it's got this build folder, and it's got this dist folder. The dist folder, right, is the distribution folder. And here it's done, completed successfully. Yay. So if I open this dist folder, in the folder it says app. That's the name of my program that I just created. And it's got all this stuff. So these are all the libraries that are linked from my thing. So here you could actually see I've got matplotlib because it's imported right here. I've got pill, numpy because matplotlib is dependent on numpy, whatever. But the important part is I can scroll over, I can hit app.exe, double click to run it, and at which point it would say, it would say hello world. And then it would close immediately. So this program doesn't actually do anything useful. Ooh, and right now it's being used as a file, which is a weird quirk sometimes. So it runs and then it thinks it's still running for a while. This is a useless program. So let's say I want a different program. I want to have something that actually opens an image and shows it to me. So I'm going to uncomment this info. And this is where things get a little bit trickier with PyInstaller. So the deal here is I'm just going to try running this app.exe again. Okay, it just closed. And an odd thing is that we have this image. So I have a folder here called images. In it I have an icon and a PNG. And when I package this, so I'm going to go back, I'm going to delete this build and this distribution folder. And so once again, I'm going to run the same exact code. PyInstaller app.py. It runs through everything. It packages everything. It creates a build directory, a distribution directory. So I'm going to wait till it's done, but it does all of this based on the imports that you have at the top of the file. So based on various packages that exist, libraries that exist. But what it's not going to do is it's not going to find certain files that you have deemed requirements for your code, but it does not necessarily understand. So here we have a folder called images. So if I open my dist folder and my app folder, there is no folder here called images. And if I run app, it'll tell me as a really quick error that this isn't working, but then it'll disappear, so we won't see it. But what this code is supposed to do is supposed to create a figure and create this and show me this image, right? It's not doing that, so it's not working. So one kind of workaround is I could manually take this folder called images. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go to my dist, my app, and I'm going to paste it here. And so I'm going to try this again. I'm going to run app.exe. And here we go. It says hello world, and it popped up this figure, right? So this is an executable file that does everything that I want it to do. Wunderbar, he exclaimed with great relish. Let's close, and everything is all done. Okay. So that's really cool, but that's a kind of dumb workaround. I don't like it. I don't want to have to manually go in here. An interesting thing is whenever I run PyInstaller, it creates this spec file. So we could see app.spec over here. I'm going to make this a little bigger so it's easier to see the file. And here we have all the information that the program just used to create this installer. So if we wanted to redo the exact same thing we did before, so there are a lot of different command line arguments that we're not necessarily going to go into right now for PyInstaller, but let's say I wanted to say like PyInstaller windowed app.py. So what this would do is it would create an executable that would run app.py, but it would not show a console window, right? I'm going to make that go away. So if I just ran that code and I want to run the exact same thing again, I could just say PyInstaller app.spec. And so it looks in the spec file and it does exactly what's in the spec file. I'm going to use this now to take my images folder and put it in my distribution folder. So over here, under this analysis object, I have an included list called datas. And datas are the things that we want to copy from our program into our distribution folder. So I'm going to add a tuple here, and it's going to be the name of the folder that I have in here. It could also be the name of the file, whatever you want. In my case, it's just images, comma, and then this is going to be the name and path of the folder inside the distribution folder. So this could be like a full path with your, C, D, directory, whatever. And this is always going to be the relative path of wherever your code is going. So here I'm taking the folder images and it's going into the folder images. It's going to look exactly the same in my distribution folder. So like I said, I'm going to run PyInstaller app.spec. Again, it created this build and distribution folder. It's working. And so I'm going to open the distribution folder, open the folder app, And here, this is the big deal, right? I see the folder called images that's in here. And so everything that was in the folder images is included. So now I can run app.exe. And it says hello world. It pops open my image. So not only did it take all my code and all the dependent libraries, but it also transferred the data that I needed to have the program run. All right. So another thing that we can do is we can, so, you know, at this point, we have this nice folder called app, and we can send it to our colleagues. But what you really want is you want to have it in a nice complete installer. And for that, we're going to use a different tool. So I'm going to open Chrome here. And I'm going to find a program called NCIS. And so I'm going to download NCIS. I'm going to go to download. So NCIS is a program for taking your open source code and making an installer out of it. So this is when you install something and it's basically just unzipping your stuff. So we're going to go through the installer, really simple, right? I already have this installed, so I'm not actually going to do this right now. I'm just going to run the program. And then you can install it and then run it at the end. So I'm going to run NCIS. And I'm going to select this thing. It's going to be installer based on a zip file. So for this, I actually need my program to be zipped up. So I'm going to right-click on the folder of my program. And let's see, in Windows, we go to, let's see, we can do send to compressed zip folder. Okay, and it's zipping all the information that we have. So while it's doing that, I'm going to go to installer based on zip file. I'm going to copy this folder. So when I hit open, I can select the zip file that's in here, app.zip. So here it's reading all the files, extracting all the files in the zip. For some reason, this package is huge, and I guess, yeah, matplotlib, things like that are big. Okay, so it's extracted it. This tiny little program actually has about 680 megabytes in it. Weirdly big, but you know, that's not a problem for right now. There's lots of different images and everything that matplotlib and PIL probably have as examples, which take up a bunch of space. So here I can name my installer. So I'm going to name it tutorial app installer. And here I have the output exe file. So I'm going to name it app installer.exe. And I'm going to say generate. So depending on, I'm guessing, the size of your program, like this can take a really long time. So don't be afraid. Your computer's not frozen. For me, this takes quite a while, so I assume I'm going to skip through it right now. Okay, so that took a really long time, but now it's done. So I can hit close, and I have this file. I have it called appinstaller.exe. So when I run it, you could see that it runs this installer for the whole thing. And what this does is it will install my program that I bundled wherever I want. So a good, cool, normal thing. And so this app installer is the only file that you need to share with people. If you really want, you could just share this app.zip, but app installer works just fine for people who don't even understand what zip files are, and they can run the thing and have it work anywhere in their computer. So one thing that some people have an issue with, depending on their preference, is that this is a lot of files and it makes things complicated. Now, you have to remember, for the end user, this doesn't really matter. But if you just want the minimum amount of files, there is a way to cut down on it. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to once again delete the build and dist folders. And I'm going to run this in a different way. And so this is actually going to be, I'm going to say PyInstaller, and I'm going to add an option here. It's going to say onefile. And onefile means that everything will be bundled into the executable file. There's not going to be all the excess DLLs and folders and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm going to say onefile, app.py, run. And so now it's going to do the same exact thing, but instead of creating this build an app folder with a bunch of stuff in it, it's just going to have one single executable in there. So it's working on that right now. And that executable is the only thing we're going to care about in the end. This gets a little more complicated when we want to bundle in images or any other kind of resources. So here we have to essentially add a little bit of information to our program. So the way our program works right now, the way my program works right now, is it has this images folder, right, and it opens up an image from it. What we need to do, when PyInstaller creates this executable file, the executable file actually sort of creates this creates this temporary directory as it's running somewhere in your user file path, wherever it's allowed. And it has a specific name, and so we need to add some code to actually code this information into the program. So here it's, let's see, building our package, everything's taking a long time. But in the end, it's actually not going to work, right? Because we have this image information. If we didn't have the resource file, so here it's done. We can go to it, dist. We can see there's just one file, app.exe. But when we run it, what happens? There was a short error. So if you would have had the console not show and stop, you would have seen that it says, hey, there is no images folder. Okay. And the same thing, you could put an images folder here. And actually, I think that wouldn't work this time around. So if we copy this images folder, we go to dist and we paste this images folder here. We run the application. Oh, okay, it does work. Here we go. And so let's see, then we could go to our app.spec. And so for datas, once again, we could put images. So this must be a convenience thing with the new PyInstaller. Or maybe this part won't work right now. So I'm going to run this again, the same way that we did before, onefile, but I'm going to do that by using just app.spec. And so I'm going to delete the build and dist folders just to show you that everything's fresh. I'm going to run app.spec. So here, once again, it created these folders. This is once again running it with the onefile option, because it's using a spec file based on what we just did a second ago. I hope. Yeah. And so it should be bundling our image file in, along with it. So here we go, it's done running. We can open our dist folder. And here what we see is there is no images folder, yikes. So when I run app.exe, it's not working. And the deal is we could put the images folder in here manually, but what we actually want is for it to be packaged inside the executable. So here it is packaged inside the executable. The problem is when the executable runs, as I said, it extracts it in some weird place in your path. But when it runs, it searches for this exact link, but this is actually pointing it to over here. So we're going to need to add a little bit more code to get this to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function here. So I'll put it on the top so everybody can see. So here it's going to say def resource path and this is going to identify the path of where our program actually sits so we can figure out where this image is and build a path to it. So this is going to get the absolute path to the resource that we need. So we're going to try. So this MEI pass is the variable where PyInstaller creates this temporary folder that it's running its executable in. And we're going to just write an exception. Oops. How frustrating. We're going to add that. And that part doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to import these things. I'm going to import OS, import system, sys. And in this function, I'm going to return os.path.join base path and relative path. So this relative path that we put in, which is our images / crab.ico, it's going to combine it with this base path. So here we're just going to edit our code a little bit. So our relative path is going to be this. And so in our function, we could say image set open, resource path with relative path. All right. So once again, what's happening here is we have a relative path, and it is creating a full resource path for us. And this is specific to the onefile option. So I'm going to save this and pray that it works. So we have our datas that are going to be copied here. Once again, I'm going to do PyInstaller app.spec to make sure this is all working. I'm going to delete the build and distribution folders, and I'm going to run this. So it's done putting together the distribution. So now we see there's no images folder in here, but I'm going to run app.exe. And voila, whoops, it works, right? And that's because these images actually exist within this executable file, and when they're extracted, our program knows how to get the resource path for this specific thing. All right. One important thing to note is the app.spec file that we created. It will get overwritten every single time we run PyInstaller with any command other than app.spec. So if we run it again with app.py, it's going to delete the app.spec folder and write a new one without this data's part that we wrote in here. So I'm just going to work with the spec file now. So one more thing that you might want to add to your program is an icon. PyInstaller is specific to the kinds of icons that you use. Specifically, we cannot use this PNG file, but we can use this ICO file. So once again, I'm going to go into app.spec, and here, so on the top we have this analysis object, and on the bottom we have this executable object, and I'm going to add a property to the executable object at the end. So here I'm going to put a comma, and the property is going to be icon, and it's going to be the path to the icon. So it's going to be images / crab ico dot ico. And so what that means is that this executable is now going to have a fun little icon to it. Boop. So I'm going to delete build. Well, I'm going to delete this distribution folder to make things maybe a little faster. Oh, and I'm going to add one. Well, no, okay. So I'm going to run PyInstaller app.spec with this icon option in the executable file. Once again, it's going to build everything. And I'm going to look in my distribution folder and wait till it's done. And here we go. So it's done building. In our distribution folder, we have app.exe. Oh, look at that. The icon didn't work. Why didn't it work? I'm going to have to do a little research on this. So as it turns out, there's, I'm just going to call it right now a weird bug. So this might work for Macs, but for Windows, it doesn't. So if we have this icon path in the app spec file, we can't really run it from the spec file. If you want to add an icon, you have to use it from the command line. So what I mean is we're going to run PyInstaller. I'm going to make this bigger so you can see where I'm typing. So I'll run PyInstaller, and I'm going to add the flag onefile, and I'm going to add the flag. I'll add another flag called windowed. So windowed is a flag that makes the console not appear. So if you have a tkinter thing or just matplotlib things that are popping up, this is what you want. I don't need this right now, but or why not? Windowed. And I'm going to say, let's see, icon equals images / crib.ico dot ico, and then I'm going to say app.py. And now once again, it's going to compile the whole thing. I realized I made a mistake here, so actually I need quotes around my icon path over here. So I'm going to run it again. Okay, so new piece of information. It looks like everything was working. The icon is setting fine. It's just for some reason not showing up in my Windows. I don't know if it's the way Windows caches icons or whatever. But if we look at the app information, the icon is here. We could hit OK, and then the icon shows up over here. So you don't actually need these quotes around it, and it should be working from the spec file. For some reason, my system is just not showing it. Okay, so I hope that helped you understand how to freeze Python programs to send them to people. If you have any questions, please post them below. Okay. Bye.